Okay, well, there's probably still some people trickling in, but we've got some just some housekeeping and introductions. So we'll get started with those. Our meeting will be recorded today, so you can review the recording later if you like. I'd also just like to note that you can turn on live captions if you wish now. Click the More button. It has 3 dots on it. Then scroll down and click Turn on Live Captions. And if you'd like to mute the binging of the chat notifications, then also under More, just choose Settings and then Mute Notifications.
Hi, everyone. Just to introduce myself, so I'm Dr. Kristen Rohde. I'm a professor of philosophy in the Center for Humanities. My pronouns are she, her, and I'll just start off with a little bit of an acknowledgement here that we're all working in a virtual experience right now, and we all have a different relationship to where we are. Right now, I'm in what's known as St. Albert, Alberta, which is on Treaty 6 territory. Athabasca campus is on the traditional homeland of the Dene, Woodland Cree, Nakota Sioux, Blackfoot, Tsuut'ina, and the Métis Region 4. And we want to sort of acknowledge that the displacement and disempowerment of these people specifically makes our work possible, or has made our work possible. So coming from all of these different places, if you would like, you can add a land acknowledgement of where you are. If that fits for you, you can put something in the chat. Just sort of giving a minute for that. In our session today, we will use Mentimeter, which is a response website. So what'll happen is I'll put a link into the chat, or we'll screen share it as well. And you go to menti.com and you add a number to sort of join our response system. So we want to hear from you. This is interactive. Just so you know, all of those responses into the Menti system are confidential and anonymous, so they do not come up with your name. You should answer, this is like a survey, answer so that we can really get at what you're thinking. And so what our format is to have 3 different academic integrity scenarios. I think this is our 4th Who Me Cheat. And so we discuss some scenarios, we get your response, and then we go around sort of and talk, and we hear from our panelists, usually for strategies and tips. What I like about academic integrity, the reason why I'm interested in it, is because it really touches every area of what we do. Learning, student support, it touches how we do our writing, how we do our research. So it's really a complex topic, and it's just, I like it. So I'm looking forward to our discussion today, and I will pass the baton to Elaine Fabro.
Thanks very much, Kristen. Hello, everyone. I'm Elaine Fabro. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm speaking to you from the town of Athabasca, which is located on the traditional territory of the Cree and the Métis people, and in Treaty 6. I'm the university librarian, and I oversee the operations of the library, the archives, and the Copyright Office. And I'll turn it over to Sarah Jean.
Thanks, Elaine. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Jean Watt. My pronouns are she or they. And I'd like to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from Emiskwachi, Waskahikan, Beaver Hills House. It's colonially known as Edmonton on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional territory of Plains Cree, Woodland Cree, Beaver Cree, Ojibwe, and the Métis people. I'm the Right Site coordinator here at Athabasca, and the Right Site, if you don't know, is AU's online writing center, and you'll probably learn a bit more about the support you can get there as we discuss our scenarios today. And today's session is a little bit different than what we've done in the past. We have some special guests who have agreed to join us to guide our discussion. Dr. Eliana El Khoury, who is Assistant Professor of Distance Education in the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences, and Dr. Stella George, who is Associate Professor in the School of Computing and Information Systems in the Faculty of Science and Technology. Eliana, would you like to say anything else?
Thank you. I wanted to mention that I am situated on the ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, which is also known as Southern Ontario, and I am excited to chat with you today.
Thanks, Eliana. And Stella?
Hi there. I'm Stella George, as Sarah Jean said. I'm based in what's known as Calgary, which is the ancestral lands of the Blackfoot in Treaty 7. And I lived for many years on actually Tsuut'ina lands in just west of Calgary itself. But currently, today, I'm speaking to you from the place of my birth. I'm in the UK at the moment.
Oh, that's exciting. I'm glad that you could still join us, Stella. Thank you both. So a few more notes. We also want to encourage everyone to contribute, so please make good use of the chat. You're also welcome to raise your hand if you'd like to speak, and we'll call on you and turn on your microphone. So raising your hand is found under the reactions button. You'll see that to the left of the more button that I mentioned before. And just a gentle reminder that this is an academic forum, so please be aware of keeping your comments professional and on topic. If there's anything you'd like to discuss with us individually, I'll put the right site, email address, and appointment calendar in the chat because we do want to be here to help. And at the end of today's session, we'll give you a chance to share questions you'd like us to address with our scenarios next time. And now, before we begin, I want to mention something very important, which is that developments around ChatGPT and AI that creates content in response to a prompt, which is known as generative AI, are still very new and they're evolving. So AU does not yet have specific guidelines that deal with artificial intelligence, though that is in the works. However, certain uses of it would be covered by existing academic misconduct policy, which I believe will come up in our discussions today. So just keep in mind that the discussion today is to merely guide you. The number one point we can give you is that you should ask your instructor or course coordinator before using generative AI like ChatGPT, and they can tell you if it's appropriate for that course and in what ways. For now, this is the interim guideline, so be sure to ask. However, we still want to talk to you to help get you thinking about what ethical use of AI could mean. And that's because academic integrity is guided by ethical thought, not only policies. So some of the discussions will be theoretical with the default answer to check with your instructor or course coordinator. But many of us are also involved in creating guidelines and policy, so we want to listen to what you think as well. So thank you for participating today. And I'll turn it back over to Kristen to get us started.
Thank you. So, yeah, thanks for that setup, Sarah Jean. We are here really as a forum to discuss, and so I'm looking forward to that. We have the right experts. And we are hoping that there's lots of discussion in the chat and let us know what you're thinking. But first, we just go right to our scenarios usually. We just jump right into that. So I believe they were circulated in advance, but we, of course, read them through. I will put this one in the chat too. So this one is called Sam's Tech Talk. So Sam has completed a research essay that she was also asked to give a recorded 10-minute presentation on. She hates giving presentations. Some people do. I totally get it. Especially hates the sound of her recorded voice. She writes her own script and uses generative AI to create the presentation. So it's her script, but generative AI to create the presentation. So the AI reads the script out loud. And since AI voiceovers are so much better now, she uses the voiceover to over the slides instead of her own voice, but also uses the generative AI to create the slides. So Sam edits the slides a little bit, but figures that since they're generated from her script, this use of AI is fine. And since the AI is reading her words, it's the same as doing it herself. So starting from this kind of scenario, is this an issue? And so what we normally do now is we will present this slide, and people can. So did Sam do the right thing? And you can join by clicking the link, or you can add that number at the top, the Menti code, and then we'll start seeing people's responses pop up. Did Sam do the right thing? Yes, because she wrote the script. The second answer is only generating the PowerPoints was wrong. Then no, because she should have checked with her instructor. And last, not really, but everyone else is doing it. So everyone can see these responses going up and down. All right. We seem, I'm not going to call it consensus, but we've got a trend. We've got a trend here. So we are going to go to our invited expert guests, and I will stop sharing. Let's hear from Dr. George.
Well, it's an interesting scenario for sure. As a technologist, this type of AI assistive tool is, it's useful, it's valuable, it's good assistive technology, especially if you have issues around presentations. And I think it's sort of empowering to be able to use it. But I have reservations about whether you should use it if this conflicts with the learning outcome of the course. So if part of the course is learning to present and learning presentation skills within the area of your discipline, then I would be a little bit concerned that this is perhaps not the most appropriate use. So I think the people that said check with your instructor, that might be fit right in there. Other than that, I don't see really any problem with it. Other than as a faculty member, I wouldn't know that Sam has done this and that it's her script unless she tells me about it. So unless she has said to me as her instructor that, or put in some written material as well as doing the presentation about how much of the work is her work, especially if she's not speaking it, I wouldn't know what portion of the work is her work versus what portion of the work belongs to the generative AI. So, I think as a faculty member, I would need some sort of statement that clarifies which components are Sam's versus automatically created versus automatically created and then edited by Sam. So it's quite complicated what information I'd need as a faculty member to know that it's okay. But I could see that there are some opportunities for using this tool to save time on something that isn't a fundamental learning outcome of the course itself. So yeah, this one is not straightforward.
I will pass it to Eliana. Dr. El Khoury, sorry.
Thank you. So I would like to agree with Dr. George that definitely the first thing that I'm going to think about is the learning outcomes. What do I expect the learners to know from this assignment, and why did I put it in that course? And based on that, I would be able to take a decision whether that's a good idea or not. But anyway, this is a one-on-one case, and I think depending on why did the student use it. So what I expect as an instructor is the student to contact me and let me know why and how they are using AI. So being aware of what the learning outcomes are, being aware of why they would like to use AI, whether for time saving or for equity reasons or for accessibility reasons. So let me know, let me be aware of what's happening, of what you learned and how did you learn it and how do you plan to apply it. And I think that it could be done on a one-on-one, one-by-one basis. And then as long as learning is happening and you are reaching your learning outcome, then why not? But always, also, I forgot, yes, always check with your instructor. So this is my personal opinion. It might not be another instructor's opinion. So that's what I'm saying. Please check with your instructor.
Of course, that's our refrain today, right? But we don't want to stop thinking there, right? We're thinking about these topics, so we will reiterate that, of course. Elaine or Sarah Jean?
Yeah, I'll jump in a little bit and just say that now I guess it's been a few months since I checked them out, but the last time I checked out an AI slide generator, it was very poorly done. So that's also something to keep in mind. These tools are very exciting, but they're also not the best that they could be yet. So be aware of that the work that is generated may not be up to the par that you want it to be for something that you're submitting. When you're submitting a paper or a presentation or any kind of academic work, it's a type of publishing. You're sending it for publication for a reader, for an audience, and that's your instructor, your professor. So you want to make sure that it's your very best work. So that's something to keep in mind. And it's not just the slide generators, but also, for example, ChatGPT is not 100% accurate. It's only updated to 2021, and the information in it is it's going to have a bias based on the data that it's was input into it. So those are just some things to keep in mind, that the tools can be useful in some ways, but they also might not be 100% accurate or doing the amazing work that you would like to send for publication.
So I have these two hands, but I'll just throw it to Elaine first, and then we'll go to Stella.
Yeah, thanks very much, Kristen. One of the things that I've been thinking about over the last while as we've been preparing for this is about that aspect of presentation. And, giving a recorded presentation is very different than giving a live presentation. And in a previous job, I recorded and created tutorials that were made available on the library website. And when I first started recording my voice, I was appalled at how bad it was because I spoke too quickly. I started my sentences too quietly, or I trailed off at the end, or I moved my head away from the microphone, so then it only got part of the word. And so what I learned was that having that opportunity to practice in small chunks, practice one slide, and record it a few times, practice it so that you know exactly, and you listen back so that you know where those issues are. It helps you to get more comfortable with what you sound like, but it also helps to make sure that your presentation is as high a quality as it possibly can be. And so I was noticing Amanda's question in the or comment in the chat as well, and I thought that would be, it's something to think about. And there's lots of tools, quick and free tools that you can use to practice that kind of thing. So so I think that's an opportunity that's built into this particular scenario.
Stella?
I totally agree, and it was Amanda's comment that prompted me to put my hand up, because I think what we might find is, well, I think you might find already, if you start to look at learning outcomes for programs as well as for courses, that actually presentation skills is already part of what students are expected to be able to do, and that it's a safe environment, largely the academic environment, in which to practice those skills. So, we're slowly evolving where we want to put the guidelines on this, and I think that it's quite possible that instructors will start to make those skills a fundamental part of what all courses that cover that include them. So I think that, in order to use that sort of technology, you may have to have some sort of formal accommodation in order to make it an option, versus I just don't like doing this and I would prefer not to, when it's a skill that we really do want you to learn. So I think that it's more of a learning outcome embedded in what we do currently than we might think it is.
Sure, go ahead.
Can I add one last thing? And I want to talk about English language learners or multi-language learners, because I am one of them, and I know it's a bit hard to put your voice out there, and it's a learning curve, but when you do it, it's worth it. And trust me, you're here to learn, and we really want to give you that opportunity. So whenever you have the chance to learn to do these presentation skills, I would advise that you do it. Of course, as I mentioned before, if you need to record it and you feel that you have a compelling case, feel free to reach out to your instructor. But if you have this opportunity to practice in a safe space, just go for it.
Thanks. I was thinking too about how, like, your instructor would receive this assignment, and understanding that in this scenario, the person did not get, permission to use these tools in advance. So we're already working in a bit of a compromised situation. I was thinking about how the instructor would probably know from the voice that it is not human generated. I'm just guessing. And then also, I want to say something about presentation slides, because it's an outcome itself about how slides relate to what you're saying, and are they to, like, sort of generate interest, or are they bullet points? If your slides just reiterate your script, that's not really demonstrating, like, a sort of skill of summary or synthesis or something like that. So we really want to learn through our assignments specific ways of schematizing information. And I was thinking about how it's very, very, very unlikely that if we find ourselves in the workplace, we're going to be able to submit a presentation that's read by AI and that has slides generated by AI, right? We're going to want to be giving that, and normally we would be taking questions, but at the BASCA, with our asynchronous learning model, we often have these kind of recorded submissions, and that might also happen in a workplace too, but different, we're moving those skills around. So we could move to the next scenario, unless there are sort of final thoughts. And we've got more, we'll touch on all these topics as we keep going.
I just want to quickly point out a couple of interesting points that came up in the chat. We don't need to discuss them in depth, but Tara mentioned accessibility reasons. If a person is unable to speak, this technology would allow them to give the presentation. And then a few people mentioned, and this may have come up in the discussion, but a few people mentioned, the spontaneous aspect of a presentation, being able to answer a question. And so that might need to be taken into consideration as well.
Okay. And I think Elaine is reading the next scenario. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Kristen. So our next scenario, Lee is taking their first university English course. Lee is a multi-language learner and often makes small grammatical mistakes in their English writing. In all other contexts, like at work, they've been using Grammarly Pro to catch grammatical mistakes. And when they use it, they diligently go through the corrections one by one to take notes and improve their grammar. But this time, Lee spent so long on their first English essay that they ran out of time to do their individual corrections through Grammarly Pro. They decide to run their essay through ChatGPT with the prompt, correct grammar and rewrite in natural English, but do not change the meaning of points made in the essay. Should Lee acknowledge the use of ChatGPT, such as in a footnote or in the references page? And is this use of ChatGPT an academic integrity issue?
Kristen, you're muted.
Thank you. Our next engagement here is to rate your engagement with the following 4 statements. Everyone can see that? The Menti link is in the chat.
There's going to be some interesting debate here, I think.
I think so. That's what I'm going for. Okay, so who should we go to first in the discussion? And then I will... So it seems like there's about a middle ground around Lee should have asked for an extension or used the right site, anything but ChatGPT, which sort of tells me that there's, you can see here there's strong views on either end and then also in the middle. So we've got some controversy there. Nobody really seems to be, everyone seems to be agreeing here that if you put ChatGPT in a footnote, you're not supposed to do that. Yeah, who would like to say something first of our panelists?
I can talk to the point about Grammarly Pro and ChatGPT doing the same thing, because actually I'm not sure that that's necessarily true. So from a technology point of view, generative tools are based on what usual practice is. So if that means that poor practice is in the examples that it's had and the many examples that it's had, then that's what you're going to have coming up. And a tool like Grammarly Pro has been specifically designed for spelling and grammar improvement, and generative tools have not. So I think there may be some sort of issue there that Grammarly and ChatGPT at first glance look like they're doing the same thing, but in practice, I'm not sure the quality with ChatGPT would be the same.
Yeah, I guess my scenario was elaborating on the thinking of the student as making a little bit of a leap there. I do like Grammarly Pro, but even when that was coming in, there was definitely a discussion about whether it is misconduct. Thinking about courses where specific grammar lessons are the outcome, and you're supposed to spot your own errors. If Grammarly Pro is doing that, it was considered to be an issue, but you do learn from them. Correcting yourself through that platform, so it is interesting.
So that comes back to the point that if it doesn't conflict with the instructor's intent for the learning, the course outcome or the program learning outcome, then it's probably okay. But if it conflicts, like you just said, well, then it's definitely not okay. You know, if you're supposed to be identifying these yourself and you're using another tool to do it for you, then that's contravening what learning is intended. And this is really complicated, these discussions, in terms of what the intent is of the learning outcome. And, I'm not sure, like, how many students really look at their learning outcomes if they're not required to. And I think, that might be something that could be taken away from this, that actually now in terms of integrity, you're going to have to be a little bit more, going to have to go and find out these things and be aware of what the intent of the course is in a way that you might not have done before.
Since this has a lot to do with writing, I'm wondering if Sarah Jean wants to weigh in here. Because we often, we've done these scenarios before, but without the emphasis on AI, and, there's a lot going on into the scenario that could have, that is also supporting the student, to become a better writer.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you already mentioned, Kristen, that there was debate and still is debate about the use of something like Grammarly. So it's very interesting because some professors may want you to use Grammarly because it will make the reading of the assignments easier for them. And other instructors, especially in English courses, may not allow the use of Grammarly in their course. So keep in mind that it could depend on the course or the field that you're studying in. And this is why asking is important for any type of corrective tool, that sort of thing. Also, to elaborate on what you were saying, Stella, the use of ChatGPT for something like this, I haven't tried it myself, so I'm not actually sure, what the result would be, but it does have the danger of changing the style a lot of your content that you created yourself, your writing. It could really change the sentence structure a lot, the tone, and also your instructor will not know, like they'll probably be able to tell that this went through generative AI. It's quite likely they'll be able to tell, but they won't know if Lee used it to generate the content completely, which would be against the misconduct policy. It would count as plagiarism. Or if, Lee just used it to brush up on their grammar kind of thing. They might not be able to tell, but they would be able to tell that it went through that system. And they might assume that it was used to generate the content. So you do have to be very careful.
I'll just throw out one of the questions that's going on in the scenario, which is about citing and referencing the use of ChatGPT and what we're thinking about for that. Maybe Elaine?
Yeah, thanks, Kristen. The library has created a citation guide, and I'll put all of these links into the chat here in a minute. And the citation guide is useful when you're trying to learn how to cite something in a particular style. The guide has recently been updated to include information about citing generative AI in the 3 major styles, so APA, Chicago, and MLA. And as I said, I'll put those links into the chat. But picking back up on the conversation, the scenario says that Lee often makes small grammatical mistakes in their English writing. And the question that I have, that this raises for me, is it worth having ChatGPT completely ruin the style or change the style? And is it worth possibly appearing to have plagiarized everything because the tone is so different, as opposed to just submitting the assignment with those small grammatical mistakes? Because at least that the professor would recognize that is more authentic to the learner based on the way that the essay has been written. As opposed to something that's been generated by an artificial intelligence tool that is obviously not going to present it in the same way.
Yeah, this is what connects to something that comes up at all of these sessions, which is time management. This student is not turning to this supportive tool out of, a good feeling and planning ahead or anything like that. We're in kind of a rough spot. So if you need help with chunking your assignments, breaking them down into smaller pieces, talk to your instructor, talk to the right site, get an appointment with a librarian to help with research, all of these things ahead of, that due date, that final submission time when we might turn to something we wouldn't normally turn to. And then that gives you more time for the learning to really sink in and to get the most out of your course, right? It's not just about, saying, don't use this, do use this. We really are trying to get the most out of these assignments and your time so that you can build on that in your future courses. So we really want to avoid that panic at the end of it. Last thoughts on that scenario?
There's an idea
Okay.
that keeps coming to me, is that I would appreciate if the student would submit, or Lee would submit the assignment without ChatGPT and telling me that I was going to edit it, but I ran out of time. Can I please get a few more hours? But in case I don't, this is the last version that I'm going to submit. This shows me that the student is trying, is learning, and is like something happened and they couldn't finish on time. So that's what I would appreciate.
Great. So let's go to our last scenario that will be read by Sarah Jean.
Okay, thanks, Kristen. Joseph has written a critical analysis essay for his 300 level English course. He's really interested in the topic and worked very hard because he's trying to get a high GPA for applying for law school. However, he heard a rumor that instructors are running papers through detection software to see if generative AI has been used. And if it comes back with any plagiarism, the assignment is given 0. This terrifies Joseph because of his law school goal. He's worried that if a machine says he plagiarized, he'll have to say goodbye to that dream. To put his mind at ease, Joseph Googles ChatGPT detector and runs his paper through the first 3 major companies to appear on the search engine. His paper comes back 21, 15, and 35% likely to have been AI generated in the different software. Joseph is certain he wrote the paper without plagiarizing. So what should he do?
Okay, so this is a hot topic. Okay, we've got a lot of options. I've got 4 options here. You can rank them. You should be able to drag them and rank them. One option is go back in time and don't Google ChatGPT detector. So we're warping space and time here. You can save drafts while you're writing. So he had proof of his writing process. Another option, everyone can see that, right? The link. Oh, here it comes. It's finally updating. Talk to your instructor about whether they will be using an AI detector, or a nasty option, which is find an AI that wipes the evidence of the use of AI. I don't know if that exists or not because I wouldn't Google it. But I'm watching all of these responses come in. Thanks everyone for your great responses this time. We just have a lot to talk. 2 and 3 are swapping around a lot. It's quite interesting. Yeah. So that's kind of settling it. So people are really in favor of saving drafts while you're writing. To me, this is a sort of low cost, what's the harm thing to do, especially if it puts your mind at ease as a student, right? But what we'll do is move around, and first I think we'll talk to Sarah Jean.
Sure. Yeah, this one is really interesting. I'm already seeing some of that nervousness pop up in the chat of having your work run through a detector. You know, Turnitin is an example. It's already come up in the chat that checks for similarity to other work that exists. And I believe now they've added a feature to check if it would be AI generated. I would definitely advise against using these tools, students especially, if you are feeling like uncertain about if you've maybe done unintentional plagiarism, something like that, then booking an appointment with the right site would be a good starting place to ensure that you don't do that unintentional plagiarism through, you know, missing citations or ineffective paraphrasing, those kinds of things. But yeah, I think a big part of this conversation is going to be around some of the questions that have come up about, are these tools being used, and what that's going to look like. So maybe I'll pass it on, but my number one suggestion for students would be don't use them. You know, it could just cause more kind of problems and confusion for yourself. Come talk to a writing coach instead. Yeah,
and I think it's interesting how it's third place, going back in time and don't Google ChatGPT detector, but I would put that at number one myself. But that's just me. There's lots that we can do. Elaine.
Thanks. Yeah, I think this is a really interesting scenario. One of the things that I think about in that idea of keeping your outlines and keeping your drafts is that you can take it a step back from that even. Go back to that time when you are taking notes based on the article that you're reading or the chapter you're reading, and determine ahead of time exactly how you're going to track quotations, track paraphrases, and track your own thoughts. So for myself, if I'm writing something, I put my own thoughts in a box, because then there's no chance of me mistakenly thinking that was something that somebody else wrote. If I'm making note of a quote, I write down the entire citation right then and there, and not necessarily in the right format, but I write down the details that I need: the author, the date, the page, the name of the item that I'm reading, just so that I can keep track of that as being something, so that when I'm actually writing my paper or writing my article, I've got that information handy. And the same thing with paraphrases. Make a note of the author and the date as you're doing those paraphrases, so that you know where that content came from. It's a general good academic integrity practice, and it can help you to avoid a scenario like this where you run it through the chat, through a plagiarism detection software, and then you're freaking out because you think that you've maybe plagiarized, because you get numbers that don't seem to match with your own understanding and your own, what you've been doing. So, and Sarah Jean's advice of talking to a writing coach is a really great one, because that can help you to work through that process.
Who should I go to next here, panelists? Eliana? Okay.
Yeah, I do not have anything to contribute at that point. At this point, I'm just going to agree.
Okay, Sarah Jean, you had some points about these as well. Additional points.
Stella, I noticed you took your mic off. Did you want to jump in?
Okay.
Yeah, I totally agree with Elaine, and I think what's happening now with the fact that these tools are present is actually really changing what's expected of students in terms of the quality of the work that they do. So whereas in the past, it's more important now than ever to be really clear about citing sources of information. And I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing in terms of the quality of the work that you're doing and the proof of the materials and the validity of the facts that you're bringing into your assignments. So, but it does change the game. And I think that, everybody thinks, oh, this ChatGPT is a nice shortcut and it's going to make things easier and take away, it's going to reduce the time it takes to do assignments and you can do everything at the last minute. And actually, I think it's going to change expectations on the quality of the work that has to be handed in now, because you are going to, as a student, have to be more transparent about where your sources come from. And that's a change of situation. The other thing I wanted to add was Sarah Gina talked very much about don't use plagiarism detectors. And it's not just the confusion around them, it's the quality of them. So at the moment, they really are the most appalling quality. And so OpenAI, who created ChatGPT, put up a detector for AI-generated stuff from their own tool and other tools in January of this year, and they took it down in July of this year because, and I quote, as of July 20th, the AI classifier is no longer available due to its low rate of accuracy. And they said that they had put it up to see if something which didn't have great accuracy was at least of some use to people. And they decided that it wasn't, which is, great news, because when something is so poor in accuracy, then, you really don't want it in place. And just to give you a feel of how bad it is, even at the beginning when they released this, it correctly identified only 26% of AI written text, right? So it got it right only 26% of the time. So 1 in 4 cases, it got it right, which is not great odds, really. And in 9% of the cases, it said it was AI generated when it actually was human generated. And I think 1 in 11 is, 1 in 10 is pretty poor, to be honest. So you need to bear in mind when you're looking at these tools that you wouldn't have these, if your faculty were answering questions at that rate of accuracy, you wouldn't be very impressed with them. So, perhaps bear in mind that it's not necessarily the answer to your questions. Kristen, is there a policy around using detectors without declaring it?
Yeah, so we have a plagiarism detection policy. It's part of our academic integrity policy at Athabasca. Is it in one of our handouts, or are we going to put it in the chat? I can grab that in a second. But essentially, the gist of it is, if I'm reading that policy correctly, if plagiarism detection software is being used in your course, it needs to be posted in the course and explained to the student before. Yeah, thank you. Oh, that's something else that is being posted. But we'll put it in the chat. So it's essentially what we're saying is artificial intelligence detection software is different than plagiarism detection software. First of all, we have a plagiarism detection software policy, but AI detection software is, shaky at best. We don't have a policy about it. And that's sort of what Stella was talking about. Yes, thank you so much for putting that in the chat. Elaine put the plagiarism detection technology policy in the chat, so you can look through that. I really recommend that students, I know it's not necessarily the most exciting thing to have to go through, but an ounce of prevention versus a pound of cure. Reading a policy and knowing that policy, knowing the misconduct policy would hopefully save the student from Googling, ChatGPT detectors and getting super stressed out. And, these policies empower both of us on the faculty side, the student side. They help us with that trust. Listen, this policy is in the driver's seat. We're both going to use it. And that's how we're going to guide our relationship. Working together for learning, that's what we're here for. We're not here to be academic integrity, detectors or plagiarism detectors. We're looking at learning, and we are updating that, but technology moves pretty quickly. So, yeah. Are there other suggestions? I know Eliana had to go, or has to go. Thanks for sticking around. From our panelists, we are going to be taking some comments that we can take away from this session, so we can guide the next one that we have. Elaine?
Yeah, just one additional resource that I want to share. We've created a academic integrity and artificial intelligence resource guide, and so I'll put the link into the chat. What this includes is information for learners and also for instructors. And we're expecting that we will be continuing to add more content to the guide. So I'll just post that now.
Thank you so much. I'm going to be circulating that. We have a question in the chat, a Read and Write app. Do you mean like Read and Write Gold or the accessibility software? That is usually
All good.
discussed in an accommodation. Yeah, that should be.
No, you
okay.
should be fine with using text-to-speech.
Yeah.
Which Read and Write is an example of that. And that's a great proofreading strategy that we teach students at the Write site. That was another thing I was going to suggest for Lee, that by working with a writing coach over time, you can actually learn to identify your own errors. And then you don't maybe need to rely on the tools. I also, would support the use of the tools when it's allowed, like Grammarly. But from a position of trying to learn from it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and our final slide on the Menti here is, and we won't screen share it, but we, rewrite and bring new scenarios every time. Our past sessions, which don't deal with AI, but we had one scenario that was about paraphrasing tools in one of our earlier sessions. But we have our previous sessions available, I think, on the library YouTube, one or more of them there, if you want to check out previous Whomie Cheats. But right now, I have the Menti link in the chat, and we're asking, what else would you like to know about AI, and what would you like a future session to focus on? So really help us figure out what another session should focus on. And there's a question in the chat about authentic assessment methods. Absolutely. There's definitely what can I say, a focus amongst a lot of the faculty around trying to adapt and improve assignments on the basis of AI. Yeah, there's a community of practice, working groups. We're all working on that. Please bring suggestions to your instructors and us. I see that there are some responses coming on this chat. People want to know more about different AI tools. I don't think I would be an AI tool educator specifically, but maybe if it's a fit for your course.
Yeah, please add your suggestions to the Menti slide, because
Yes.
then we'll be able to look into them more deeply, see if we can address some of them later.
One of the comments is to have each course updated with what is authorized and what is not. That's a great suggestion. I know a lot of faculty are really thinking about that, putting an announcement. What we have right now is sort of a rule of thumb, which is assume that it's not and talk to your instructor. We're not saying it's not, but talk to your instructor. Yeah. People are asking for creative, authentic assessment methods to adapt to AI. That's great. I want that too. I think that this recording will be added to the YouTube, yes. Someone is requesting a panelist for the next session. we'll take note of all of that.
Thanks everyone for your awesome participation today. Like, just a really rich conversation in the chat, and great panel discussion as well.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Thanks for coming. Take care.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you,
Thanks, Stella. It was great to have you.
Absolutely.
Happy to come back and talk about AI anytime you need that addition to the conversation.
Great.
We'll need it again, I'm sure.